Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're going to give everybody a few minutes to get in, or about a minute, and then Pat will start. But I just want to say hi, welcome to our webinar today.
As folks are arriving, if you could have scratch paper available, that will be handy so that you can note any questions that you have during the presentation. And we'll wait maybe just one more minute for people to arrive. All right, I'm going to go ahead and begin now. I'd like to say good afternoon. My name is Pat King. I've taught math in Davis for 33 years, and during 10 of those summers, I was a writer for the Math Diagnostic Testing Project, and currently I'm working as one of the school outreach facilitators for Northern California. Today we have a team from the Math Diagnostic Testing Project that will be helping us to answer questions in the Q&A section. So as the presentation is going on, please note any questions you might have on your scratch paper, and you can submit those into the Q&A. They will help moderate those questions and bring them to our Q&A time at the end of the session. This is a webinar format, not really a Zoom meeting. So the intent is to provide information for you for about 30 minutes and then have a 15-minute Q&A at the end. You can use the chat as needed to communicate, but predominantly we hope your questions will show up in the Q&A section. The Math Diagnostic Testing Project is funded by a CSU UC grant. And so with that grant, we're able to provide a series of webinars for you that we've developed. And this is the first of that series. And this is an introduction to the MDTP assessment system. In webinar number 1, we're going to take a look at the who, when, and why of the MDTP system. We're going to take a look at some suggested uses of the MDTP assessments. We're going to look at an overview and what MDTP has to offer to schools and districts. We're going to take a brief look at the reporting tabs that are available within the system. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll then have a Q&A section. In webinar number 2, which will be later this afternoon, we're going to take a look at the actual logistics of testing, what it is that teachers need to do in order to enter their student names and get them enrolled in the testing program. That webinar and this webinar will be repeated also on August 14th and August 18th. So if you have interest in attending any of those, please feel free to go ahead and register. If you find that this webinar would be helpful to bring to your staff or to your school, you can contact either Carol or myself. Our information will be on the last screen of the PowerPoint, and we can bring a Zoom meeting to your district if you believe that this information will help your teachers then be able to utilize our system. The MDTP began several years ago when UC CSU calculus professors met and realized that if they knew what their students were bringing to their classes, they felt that they could create better lessons. And that is the model that we still use today as we look at the MDTP tests. It's important for you to recognize that when you are looking at the content of our tests, that we think about what are the important prerequisite skills that your students are going to bring to your course in order to be successful. We also spend time in the summers when we're writing the test as teachers to give careful attention to the answer choices that are provided for students. If you take the time to administer tests to your students, we want it to be able to provide as much feedback to you as possible about the student's choice of answers, to highlight common misconceptions or identify unfinished learning. So there's a lot of attention given so that that information is given to you in a way that you can use it as a formative assessment. I have always used MDTP as a formative assessment in my class. I would use the test results specifically to identify, for example, the strengths of my students. I want to be able to know what topics, again, these are looking at prerequisite topics that my students have strengths with. I would also use the data to diagnose weaknesses that I could address in my lesson planning and areas of improvement that we could use even as a department school-wide. So all of the information that is provided for you in the testing is hopefully something that you can use in your instructional planning. It's important that I believe that the students also understand that these readiness tests are designed to help you as a teacher understand where they are as they come into your course. I think the challenge now more than ever, as you have students come back to you from a kind of a chaotic spring, that we want students to understand that in mathematics, there's a progression of skills, and the information that you get as a teacher from this test will allow you to build as a foundation as students move forward in your course. We want students to understand that now more than ever, a growth mindset is critically important, because the information that they provide on the testing for you today will help you create better lesson plans and be able to help students move from where they are. The MDTP system, we have grade level assessments of preparedness that are available for you. Those are tests that address grades 6, 7, and 8. The tests were written both online or for paper testing. Due to the COVID now, we will not be administering and scoring paper tests, but you can administer all our tests to your students online. Again, recognize that these tests are prerequisite skills for grades 6, 7, and 8 Common Core courses. We also offer readiness tests for courses, both the traditional pathway of algebra, geometry, algebra 2, as well as the integrated 1, 2, 3 courses. We also offer a test for your pre-calculus students that's titled the Math Analysis Test, and we also have a calculus readiness test. And again, all of those exams also can be administered online. MDTP has also written a series of tests to support 9th grade assessments to meet SB 359. Because those tests need to be proctored live, they are not available during COVID. And then to further help you as a teacher, we also have a series of written response items that are available to teachers. These written response items are a single topic. You can, as a teacher, print the test item, the response item itself, as well as a rubric. In order to access those items, you would go to our MDTP website and request access. Then you're allowed to print and be able to score your student work independently. These items I've used these items, they're very well written. They lead to rich classroom discussions. So I encourage you to look at these items. We will have a webinar in October that will address in more detail those particular items and how you might use them with your students. Because we are funded again by the UC CSUs, all of these tests and the written response items are available free to you as school districts. So this is the what we have available. Now what I'd like to talk a little bit about is when you might want to use these tests. Since you are at the beginning of your school year and thinking about your calendar, one of the things that you might consider are different times that you might use our testing. There is a document, an extensive document called Recommendations for Testing and Suggested Uses that was sent to you as part of your invitation to this webinar. In that document, it gives specific grade level recommendations and tests that you could use throughout the 6th through 12th grade, 5th through 12th grade system. This table here, however, though, gives you kind of a general overview of what you might consider as you look at the testing. If, for example, you are teaching a 6th, 7th, or 8th grade Common Core course, then you would administer perhaps at the beginning of the year the assessment of preparedness for 6th, 7th, or 8th grade if it's a standards-based course. Again, keeping in mind that these are not course finals, they're not cumulative, they're exams that, again, teachers who teach the 8th grade believe these are skills students need to bring to the course as readiness. It could include content from 6th grade, from 7th grade, those items that we believe will be helpful for student success in that course. If you are teaching a course such as the Algebra 1 or Integrated Math 1, we have an Algebra Integrated Math 1 readiness test that, again, will help you evaluate where your students are as they come into your course. We also then, you also then have the option during the year, if you wish, to administer the same test again to monitor any interventions that you might have in place. You can also use the same test again in order to show student growth from the beginning of the school year. Then at the end of your course, you would then administer the next subsequent test from your course. So for example, the Algebra 1 students at the end of the year would take the Geometry Readiness Test. The Geometry students would take the Algebra 2 Readiness Test. Students in Integrated Math 1 would take the second year Integrated Readiness Test. Students in Integrated 3, for example, then would take the Math Analysis or Pre-Calculus test, and your Pre-Calculus students would then take the Calculus test. Now, if you are teaching a group of students out of grade level, or you are teaching a support class, you also have access to tests that any of the tests in our test bank. So in general, if you are teaching a standards-based course, you would give the title of the test that matches that course. But if you are teaching out of grade level or you're supporting students in a resource class, for example, and want to, if they were, for example, students enrolled in an Integrated Math 1, if you wanted to assess earlier skills in grade 6, 7, or 8, you also have access as a user to those tests if you wish to use those, and that would help you in your planning for the lessons that you provide for those students. In the second webinar, that's where we will take the time to show you where those tests are located. You can preview those tests anytime in your account, so recognize that you can see all of those items before you assign them to any of your students. Once you have administered the test to your students, again, that is what we have available and when you can administer them. What I'd like to do now is to just briefly show you the reporting features that you have access to as a teacher. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and go to a sample file. So let me change my screen here. This is the testing portal. The testing portal is the same for both students and educators. I'm going to go in now and just look at a sample file. If you go in as a teacher, notice that you'll click on the Readiness tab. You'll use your email that you have for your account. You're going to enter your password. Now, if you have used MDTP in the previous year, our system resets all the passwords on August 1st, so you may need to reset your password if you have not used your account since last year, but the system will guide you through those steps. This is an example of a sample report from an Integrated Math 1 class. And when you are looking at your student reports, Up here over on the left-hand side are the tabs that you have access to as a teacher. This is the summary page, and on the summary page, this tells you the topics that are on the test. So there's a listing here of the particular questions that are on the integrated math test itself. It tells you how many items in each of those topics were on the test. It also tells you the critical level, and that is what's considered to be the minimum number of correct responses for a student to show adequate preparation for that particular topic. There will be a webinar number 3 where Carol will take you through a more in-depth look at your student data. That is scheduled for September, when you've had an opportunity to be able to administer the test to your own students. But we're going to just take a look at a sample class now so that you'll know what reports are available to you. This data that is over here on the right is also available in table form on the left-hand side. And notice that all of this data can be exported as a PDF if you wanted print material, or you could export it into Excel so that you would be able to then use that data as a teacher to group classes together or group schools together. A page that I find particularly useful is the topic summary tab. So for example, when I taught Integrated 1, my Chapter 5 test dealt with exponents. So 2 to 3 weeks before I'm going to teach my exponent chapter, I would take a look at my student results. I would want to take a look at items that students were both strong in or demonstrated a weakness, so that I could then work with my students before we began the chapter, recognizing again that these are readiness skills. When you click on the item, the test item will appear on the screen. It will also show you for your class what your student percentages were and what number of students chose each of the individual items. Now you'll notice also at the bottom of the screen, it tells you if there are students that omitted the question. Since these are diagnostic tests, it's important that your students understand that they should not just click on any answer, that they shouldn't guess. They should choose answers that they believe are the correct answers, or that they have a good idea are the correct answers. And if there's something that they don't know how to do yet, that they should leave it blank. So this would be another indication as a teacher of something that you might want to take a look at. Now, for this particular item, common mistake often made by 8th or 9th grade students, the distractor, item number A, I noticed that 54% of the students chose that item. When you click on that particular distractor, notice that it provides a student list. Now, this is data from a test in 2016. So notice that the students' names are not listed, but their ID numbers are listed. When you have a test that you are using with your students, the student names will actually appear in this list. So you will be able to help students and be able to directly address those students that have misconceptions. Those student names are typically removed in December of the year following that particular school year for security purposes. But again, for your own use in the classroom, if you're going to be differentiating your instruction, this could be quite helpful. We also have supporting information that will help you identify why students perhaps made that particular error. Another tab that's available is the item analysis tab. The item analysis tab lists all of the items on the test in order as they appear on the test themselves. Again, you can click on the items over here if you wanted to see the full test item like you just saw on the previous screen. It tells you what the topic is for each of the items, the average amount of time students spent on the item, the percent correct for your particular class. So this, for example, would indicate an item of strength. This will tell you the percentage for each of the distractors. What's in green is the correct answer. And the other handy thing, I think, with the online testing is that you can click on a column and it will rank those items for you. Again, since it's a diagnostic, because it's a formative assessment, for me, it was always important that my students understand that they shouldn't guess, but to skip something that they felt that they couldn't answer at that time. So this column, for me, particular at the beginning of the school year, would be helpful because this would tell me that these would be 2 items in particular that I want to take a look at and address with my class at a later time. Another report tab that's just kind of fun is a graph that shows the amount of time that students spent on particular items. Again, this is interactive in that you can just click on the item and you'll be able to see then the full item and the data from your class if you are interested in. The last tab that's available to you is a listing of the individual results for your entire class. This is particularly helpful, again, at the beginning of the school year. As you look at your class data, notice that, again, in your actual report, a student name would appear here, not a student number. This will tell you how many items the students marked on the test and what was the last item marked. It tells you in each of the topic areas how many questions a student got right in each of those topics. The little asterisk next to the number tells you that that student met the critical level for that particular topic. When you are looking at your student results, I would really encourage you to look carefully at these topics, not just at what their raw score or their percent correct is, but thinking about what strengths your students are demonstrating, as well which particular topics you would want to address. As you scan the numbers on this page, 2 items in particular stand out. Notice that, for example, for this student, they marked 29 items, but yet they got all the way to the last item that they marked was question 45. Now, that to me as a teacher would be a flag that I would want to take a look at more depth as to what that student, particularly at the beginning of the school year, I would want to look to see if there was a language issue or a processing issue, getting to know, again, more about that particular student. Another set of numbers that would draw my attention is here. Notice that this student marked 22 items, and the last item that they marked was item 23. So again, if I did not know, as I'm administering, if you're administering this test remotely, that would also be a flag that you would want to know why it was that the student was not able to complete the test. Or is this a student who is extremely careful and deliberates a great deal, a long amount of time over a particular test question? Again, this would just simply raise a flag of information that I would want to pursue as a teacher. Notice that, again, you can print this report. You can also download individual details or individual summaries into an Excel spreadsheet if needed. A new feature that we've just added this year is that if you click on a student name, you'll get a summary as a teacher of all of the work that that student did for this particular test. So you can take a look at how much time they spent on particular questions, as well as their topic levels. And then we also have a feature now where you can export a student letter. So once you have the student record open, you can click on Export Student Letter, and there is a letter that is generated that will tell students their topic scores and strengths and areas of review that they might need. These letters cannot be batch emailed. You can download them individually as a teacher or a school, and then if you want to share them with your students, you now have the option to do that. All right, at this time, I'm going to switch back to our session. We have other resources available for you. The MDTP website, our MDTP offices are located at UC San Diego. This is the website that you can visit at any time. And at our website, notice that there's a listing of the regional sites that are available with contacts for each of the regions that are throughout California. There are links here to talk a little bit. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the written response items are here, the description of the tests. We also have a tab now that focuses just on the online testing. So there are tutorials and handouts available, this description of supports that we have for online testing. In terms of the tutorials, we'll take a look at that again in webinar number 2 in more detail of how to enroll your students and administer the test, and then contact information that's available here. So recognize that this is also a resource that you have access to. Carol, there's a team of us that are available to be able to help you in each of the regions. Carol's information is here because she is going to be preparing webinar number 3 and number 4, which will be in September, which is how to look at your test data in depth and analyze your data and what to do with the data once you have it. I'm going to be doing this session clearly, as well as a second session on logistics. So at this time, if you have questions that we have not addressed just yet, would you please take a moment and go ahead and write those questions into the Q&A tab?
Hi, Pat. Thank you. I want to make a couple announcements, or actually introductions.
Thank you.
Yeah, since we do have a panel here to help with these questions. So please go ahead and place your questions. We'll be answering them as we come up. Thanks, Pat. I think that was a really great show of the different pieces of the MDTP assessment system. So my name is Kimberly Samaniego, and I'm the director of MDTP. Pat is the outreach facilitator at UC Davis. We have 8 regions, 4 in the CSU and 4 in the UCs across the state of California that support MDTP use. So Pat is the outreach facilitator in UC Davis and covers the northern region up through Chico and above, and Lake Tahoe and east. Amelia with Pat is Julie Mustard, and Julie is the coordinator for UC Davis, and they will support you. We also have Emiliano Gomez, who is our site director at UC Berkeley. Emiliano and Pat and Carol all go out to the different sites and work with teachers. Right now, we're not actually moving anywhere. We're working remotely. So just also so you know, there might be questions about why we're not offering paper testing, is we're not allowed to be at our offices right now. We're all remote testing. So we're remote working, remote testing, and supporting that. And then I think we have Karen. Karen is also here. Carol Treglio, I didn't make a special announcement, is the outreach facilitator for the UC San Diego region. And then Karen is here also, and she works in the director's office with me as part of an admin side of supporting MDTP use. So that's just to give you a little bit of time to ask some questions. And while we're asking them, I did say that I'd put my name in the hat to answer the first question. If you guys don't mind, I'll take that, and then I'll let somebody else talk for a minute. So first question that we left was, how do you address the SB 359 during COVID, or has the state suspended this requirement? The state has not suspended the requirement for, basically SB 359 is equitable and transparent placement, making sure that students are accessing the appropriate coursework and not being asked to repeat coursework that they have been successful in middle school, in 8th grade, basically. What we're offering is that we do have some guidelines that we can send out. I know that Pat's going to talk about this in session 2.
Yep.
But we have readiness tests that could meet your needs. So during this time, instead of using our 9th grade assessments, we recommend that you use a readiness test So we have the algebra readiness test that could be working for 8th graders that are currently in Common Core Math 1, are currently in Common Core Math 8, and we have an integrated second year and a geometry readiness for students who are in the integrated Math 1 or Algebra 1 in the 8th grade. So we do have tests that you can use. We do ask that you understand that the metrics of the measure should be used differently if you're using it to help inform course options versus place readiness. Additionally, part of that, the SB 359 is that when students enter when they're in your course in the first month, that you do a check-in with them to make sure that their placement, we use, the P word, it's a bad word because we want to talk about appropriate enrollment. So checking to see that students are in the right coursework is important. It's part of that mandate. So our readiness tests are perfect for that. So we do support that. I hope that answered that question. Carol, did you want to throw another question out there?
Or Emiliano, does he have one?
Does anybody want to take, yes, go ahead, Emiliano.
I was answering some of the questions by typing them out, but there were some of the questions were about the logistics of testing and whether or not, for example, as Pat was showing that there was this student who only completed 22 or 23 questions out of the 45. Is it possible for a teacher to allow either one or more students or the entire class to test over more than one session? And the answer is yes, you can do that. You can close a test and then open it again for students. There are some, tiny little logistics that are easy to do. You can follow the directions in the online platform, but it's very easy to do that.
And that's in webinar number 2 also.
And we do have a really rigorous set of tutorials that are on our website. As Pat showed you, the website we have, it has quite a bit of information support for instructors how to do that. There's another question about, the students need to be rostered? Yes, they absolutely do need to be rostered on this particular website. On this platform. Before you can even assign a test, you'll need to have students rostered into the classroom. That again is easy to do. We offer a template. We ask for you to cut and paste into that template and then load that into your class after you set up a class.
And I'll show you those screens in the second webinar.
And then there was another question about, can students, you have a limited class time with them. We understand there's going to be quite a bit different types of learning. There might be hybrid, there might be all distance learning, it might be some in class time. We do understand that this is going to be a very uncertain time. We're going to be offering remote testing. So we have a protocol. We will be going over that in session 2. We have an agreement on how that works. We provide students with some help on that, some video, but we plan to offer remote testing probably through we'll kind of look and see how it's going in February, but at least through the end of the school year. At UC San Diego, which is where we're located, we aren't even asked to come back, be considered to be coming back on campus until January 1st. So it's just, we're just up in the air. So yeah.
There's a question about whether or not these tests are timed, and the timing is up to the teacher. You can give your students, you can close the test whenever you want if you want the test to have a hard time limit. Well, but you can also give your students more time if you want. What we hope is that teachers will make that decision in a way that it gives you the most possible helpful information that you can have to help your students.
Additionally, the tests are only available from 7 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. We had this program for obvious reasons. We didn't want students to continue to work on a test that after they left your proctor site. So we still have those protocols in place. So the students cannot access the test after 5:30 in the evening. So they could have as much time as they want in the test, but it closes and then they might need to open it up, as Emiliano said, another day.
there's a question that says, what is the recommended time to give the students? Usually, especially with paper tests, I think we usually had a printing at the very front of the page that says the recommended time is approximately 45 or 50 minutes or something like that. So usually a typical class period for a 45 question exam. And some tests have fewer questions. Like the 6th grade has 35 questions, and there are some tests that have 40 questions, I believe. But usually about one class period. But having said that, again, if you want to give your students more time, that's completely up to you, if you think you're gonna gain useful information from doing so.
And in webinar number 2, we are going to talk about trying to proctor the test through a Zoom meeting. So one of the recommendations that teachers shared from this past spring was to perhaps set your Zoom meeting for 2 hours. So that way students can work within the technology. They have an opportunity to see the little animation. And then you would close the test at the end of that 2-hour period, or when you felt like your students had sufficient time.
There are 2 questions that I see. I think I would like perhaps to leave one for Kim. The one I'm seeing, there's one that says that, do we need to proctor, or can they work on their own time? And again, we have developed a policy and a user agreement for remote testing. We recommend proctoring if you can.
Yes.
I'm not sure if it's always possible, but we do recommend it. And there's another question. I'm not sure that I can answer it. Maybe you, Kim, or someone, about the remote testing at different times, or have a window open for the whole class. I'm not sure.
So that is a good question. You can assign a testing window of time that a code, so students access this through the URL, which is mdtpdiagnostic.ucsd.edu. I'm not expecting you to memorize that. We can send that to you. But the URL and then a code. So when you assign a test and you proctor it for a certain amount of time, you get a code. And that code is good for as long as you have the window open. That code doesn't work after 5:30 at night. So if the students if you have a testing window as an instructor, open it up for 3 days. The students can take the test anytime during those 3 days from between 7 and 5:30. If you decide that all your students have finished the test and you want to close it so their code is no longer valid, that's fine. You may need to reopen it, re-proctor test if you've closed it, and then students can get back in and finish.
And they'll get a new code to do that.
That's right, a new code. These are really good questions, very much logistics. And we still have a few more minutes, so if you guys have any questions on the logistics, this is a great time. The students are all, thank you, Heidi, for the questions. Students are given all the same questions. They see the same questions. I'm not quite sure, different values, meaning they're getting different results. So they're all, the different values would be they're assessed, they're evaluated. Basically, it's how they're doing on their topics of readiness on that test. So they're going to be getting a score on their topics, and they're going to be getting an overall score.
And then just as a point of interest, the tests are written so that easier items, students begin the test, and then they get increasingly difficult as students continue through the test. But we really want to encourage students to stay in the test as long as possible. So one of the things you're going to want to reinforce with your students is, if you run across a question that you don't know how to do, skip it, come back to it later if you want, and continue to move on through the test. So this is not a branched logic testing experience. We really want students to attempt as many items and complete as much as they can during the test.
Pat, I also wanted just to say that I really appreciated what you said about this is giving us information about our students, what they know when they come and see us, and being in uncertainty about the coursework that they have been engaged in prior to this fall. So with a growth mindset is that students will have different readiness. Readiness levels are malleable and they change. So as we work with our students, their readiness improves over time. So while some students may not show the same readiness, it's always the readiness now and in the future. So readiness yet. Just remember that this is data to help you provide the best instruction possible to support your students. You might think about how could you, in this time, if you have remote learning, also assign students maybe different types of tasks based on what you learn. Just some different ideas, but this is really not getting into ideas about this. Is a different session that Carol's doing in next week, or actually
September.
It's in September after you have data about what you could do with the data. But I just really appreciated the idea about the growth mindset. So thank you about that. Okay, so uses a Desmos calculator. MDTP tests are designed so that they do not need a calculator. In fact, we say we should not use calculators. They not only assess computational proficiencies, but they also assess a knowledge about what a conceptual understanding of problems, like how would you solve a certain problem. So they do have computational type problems and that fluency in that, but also the procedural, like what is the correct procedure to use. So we wouldn't want students to use calculators. It's not designed for a calculator use. Desmos are a great teaching tool though. I'm teaching this summer and I'm using it quite a bit.
So there's a question that says, is there information that teachers can share with parents? And is there information including bilingual stuff? And we do think that this information that you get from the testing is something that you can definitely share. You should definitely share with your students, of course, but also it's good to share with parents. If you have parent-teacher conferences, you can have those results laid out on your computer and talk about those results at your meeting with your students, teachers, parents. We also have the report available in Spanish. Is that correct, Kim?
I made a note on that to check to see with the reports that we have right now. If they're, I think we have a few of our older tests have the Spanish, but I'm not positive that the newer ones, because we have all upgraded all of our tests to the, they've all been aligned to Common Core. So I'll have to check that out.
Okay. And most of our tests are, well, at least some of our tests are available also in Spanish, so for the students to take them in Spanish. So we have those two languages only, English and Spanish.
And also we now have Pat had showed you that you export a PDF file. We now have where you can go in for each student and export a student letter that is individual for that student. So you don't have to be in person to hand out the letters. You can actually download the individual letters for each student and maybe email them to the students or however you connect with them during your class time. So that makes it easier for you to share those student letters with the students, and you can also encourage them to share them with their parents. If students have an IEP, we do recommend that you have them use whatever accommodations that they would need to use this to access the test. Absolutely. Tests are validated. Yes, we field test an MDTP test for 3 to 5 years before we release test. We make sure that the items are predictive, and we make sure that the test is valid, which means it is actually test assessing what we want to learn about the readiness for a particular course. So the thing about remote testing that we have to keep in mind is that if we're not proctoring a test and students are taking the test, that it could compromise validity. One way that I know as an instructor, and I'm now instructing at UC San Diego this summer, one thing that I know is that if you let your students know why you're using the assessment, they will give you results that will help you help them. So if they understand this is to inform, it's to help the instructors, that maybe tutors, support groups that are wanting to learn about what students know so that we can provide the best instruction possible to support students. If they know that, they're going to give you better results. So this is part of the validity process. It's also for the students to understand why they're being assessed. So that's my biggest thing about the integrity of a testing. It doesn't matter what test you're giving. If your students understand the purpose, they're going to give you the better results.
I would like to add a little bit to that, if I may, because there were some questions before about whether every student gets exactly the same test, and they do get the same test. And a big part of the reason for that is that the MDTP's work group does a lot of statistical work on the tests before we release them. We test thousands and thousands of tests, and we correlate the items with the whole test and with the post-test and with teacher evaluations of students. And we know from having done these experiments as we develop the tests that we may shuffle some things around or change items by a little bit. We know that little changes in the test can really have hard to predict outcomes. Yeah. And so we want the test to become very stable statistically. And that's why we don't want to give different values or different ordered items to different students, because the integrity of the test would also suffer. The statistics could change if we do that.
Okay, now I understand what that question about value was. Thank you, Emiliano. And then, Pat, did you say you had something?
No, I think when we're ready, Karen has a link to share for a survey and feedback.
Okay, there was one more question. When rostering students, does the underscore need to be included? No. There doesn't need to be an underscore, no, but you need to use the template. So when you download our template, it has 3 worksheets on the bottom, and the first worksheet is where you're going to place the information in. So I think that you're looking at headers. So last name, first name, and that student ID will be 3 different headers for columns. Just go ahead and load in their last name in the right column, their first name in the right column, and their student ID. Make sure the student ID is unique. That's how we differentiate students when they get into the test, is by their ID and their last name. We just had to include the last name is there because some teachers were giving also really close IDs. So giving students IDs is 1, 2, 3, 4. That's probably not a good idea, because students will forget which number that you assign them, and they might use somebody else's ID. So try to make sure that their ID is something they can actually identify with. So it's part of one of their school IDs, or if you're making them on your own, make sure they're quite unique and not something that a student could guess to get into somebody else's, because they will load them into somebody else's test if it's rostered the same way. And will rostering be covered in part 2?
Yes.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, so it looks like Karen put the feedback in the chat. There's a survey in the chat. So if you want to just give us some feedback for this series, as Pat had mentioned, we have a whole series, and we're doing the first 1 and 2 is basically logistics of testing, and then 3 or 4, Carol's going to be working on that about when you have data and how you can use the data. And then I'm going to be doing the written response items when I didn't have enough room on the flyer to put it on there, so that's in October. Do we have any last minute questions? Thank you. Thank you. I hope you found this informative, Pat. Awesome. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll see you for webinar number 2 in just a little bit.
And also, we're offering it on Wednesday, which is on the 12th, I think.
And the following Tuesday.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
Yeah. So there's 2 more opportunities.
On the 18th.
18th
yes.
And the 14th. Yep.
No, the 12th and the 18th.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, if we have no more questions, we have then we'll see you in about what time we starting the next one? 3:30. 3:30. We'll see you at 3:30 if you're coming back. Go get a break and we'll see you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.